Christmas morning always felt magical to me, but this year was different. The scent of pine from our tree mixed with cinnamon candles as I held my 6-month-old son, Ethan, close to my chest. This would be his first real Christmas dinner with the whole family at my parents' house in Denver. My husband, Marcus, had gotten special leave from the military base just for this day. I was so excited for everyone to see how much Ethan had grown, especially my sister Jessica. She had seemed a bit distant lately, but I figured she just needed time to adjust to being an aunt. Before I share what happened that changed everything between us, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and please hit that like button if you have ever felt like your family just did not have your back when you needed them most. Now let me tell you about the Christmas dinner that tore my family apart. The drive to my parents' house that December afternoon filled me with anticipation. Marcus sat beside me in his dress uniform, looking every bit the military commander he was. At 32, he had worked his way up to major and now led a special operations unit. His strong hands gripped the steering wheel as we navigated through the snowy streets of Denver. In the back seat, Ethan slept peacefully in his car seat, wearing the adorable red velvet outfit I had picked out weeks ago. Marcus and I had been married for 3 years, but this felt like the most important Christmas of our lives. Everything had changed when Ethan was born 6 months ago. The tiny human had brought so much joy into our world, and I could not wait to share that happiness with my family. My parents, Robert and Linda, had been over the moon about their first grandchild. My older brother David and his wife Sarah had been incredibly supportive, always asking about Ethan and sending thoughtful gifts. But Jessica was different. At 26, she had always been the baby of the family, used to being the center of attention at every gathering. When we were growing up, she had this magnetic personality that drew everyone to her. She could light up a room with her laugh and had this way of making everyone feel special when she focused her attention on them. That was before Ethan came along. The changes started subtle. Jessica used to come over twice a week to visit, bringing coffee and wanting to hear all about my day. After Ethan was born, those visits became less frequent. When she did come by, she seemed uncomfortable around the baby. She would make comments like, "You only talk about baby stuff now," or, "Do you ever think about anything else besides him?" I tried to include her in conversations about work and her dating life, but she always seemed distracted. Marcus had noticed it too. One evening after Jessica left early from dinner, he had pulled me aside in our kitchen. "Something is off with your sister," he said, his military training making him particularly observant about changes in people's behavior. "She gets this look in her eyes when she watches you with Ethan. It is not a happy look." I had defended Jessica, telling Marcus that she just needed time to adjust. After all, it was a big change for everyone. I convinced myself that she was probably just feeling left out, and that once she saw how wonderful it was to be an aunt, everything would go back to normal. I even bought her an extra special Christmas gift this year, a beautiful necklace that said, "Auntie," with Ethan's birthstone. I thought it would make her feel included and important. The weeks leading up to Christmas, I had spent hours planning the perfect day. I researched baby-friendly recipes since Ethan was just starting to eat solid foods. I practiced feeding him different textures so he would not make too much of a mess at my parents' table. I wanted everything to be perfect for this special family milestone. Marcus had to request special leave from his commanding officer to attend Christmas dinner. His unit was scheduled for training exercises, but family time was important to both of us. He had been deployed for 2 months earlier in the year and missed some of Ethan's important firsts. This Christmas was our chance to create beautiful family memories together. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. The house looked exactly like it did every Christmas, growing up with white lights twinkling around the windows and a wreath on the front door. Through the window, I could see the warm glow of the living room where we would all gather later. Everything looked perfect on the outside, but something felt different this year. Maybe it was just new parent anxiety, but I could not shake the feeling that this Christmas was going to be unlike any other. My parents' house felt exactly like home when we walked through the front door. The familiar smell of my mother's turkey and stuffing filled the air, mixed with the scent of the massive Christmas tree in the living room. Mom rushed over to take Ethan from my arms, her face lighting up as she cooed at her grandson. Dad stood behind her, beaming with pride, as he watched his wife fuss over the baby. "Look how big he has gotten," Mom exclaimed, bouncing Ethan gently in her arms. "And those cheeks? Robert, look at those precious cheeks." Dad reached over to tickle Ethan under the chin, earning a delighted giggle from my son. "He is going to be a heartbreaker like his old man," Dad said, glancing at Marcus with approval. My parents had always loved Marcus, especially Dad, who respected his military service and leadership qualities. David and Sarah arrived shortly after us, bringing an armload of presents and huge smiles. Sarah immediately went to Mom to get her turn, holding Ethan, while David shook hands with Marcus and asked about his latest deployment. The living room filled with the comfortable chatter of family catching up, and for a moment, everything felt exactly right. But Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Mom noticed me looking around and explained, "Oh, honey, Jessica is running late. She had some last-minute shopping to finish up. You know how she is." But something in Mom's voice told me there was more to the story. When Jessica finally arrived an hour later, the whole dynamic of the room shifted. She walked in wearing a stunning red dress that she clearly had spent a lot of money on, her makeup perfectly applied. But her smile looked forced, and her eyes immediately went to where I sat, feeding Ethan his bottle. "Sorry I am late, everyone," Jessica announced, but she did not sound sorry at all. She hugged Mom and Dad quickly, barely glancing at Ethan, who was making happy babbling sounds in my arms. "Jessica, come see how much your nephew has grown," I called out, patting the couch cushion next to me. But instead of coming over, she sat down in the chair across the room and pulled out her phone. The conversation naturally centered around Ethan, as it had for months now. David and Sarah were asking about his sleeping schedule and whether he was rolling over yet. Mom was planning which baby food she wanted to try making for him. Dad was already talking about teaching him to fish when he got older. Everyone was so excited and engaged, sharing in the joy of watching Ethan discover the world. But from across the room, I could hear Jessica making small comments under her breath. When Mom mentioned how smart Ethan seemed, Jessica muttered, "All babies do that." When Sarah talked about how much he looked like Marcus, Jessica said, "I guess," without even looking up from her phone. Marcus, sitting beside me, began to notice Jessica's behavior too. I watched him observe her with the same careful attention he used when assessing potential threats during his military operations. His jaw tightened slightly when Jessica rolled her eyes at something Dad said about Ethan being advanced for his age. The tension became more obvious when we moved to the dining room for dinner. Mom had set the table with her best china and Christmas decorations, making everything look festive and special. I had brought a high chair for Ethan so he could sit at the table with us while I fed him some of his baby food. As we all took our seats, Jessica looked directly at the high chair and said loudly, "Really, he is going to sit at the table with us. Is not he going to make a mess?" The whole room went quiet for a moment before Mom quickly jumped in to say how wonderful it was to have 3 generations at the Christmas table. But Jessica was not finished. Throughout the meal, she continued making comments that felt like tiny cuts. When Ethan dropped some food on the floor, she sighed dramatically. When he made happy baby noises, she complained that she could not hear the conversation. When I got up to change his diaper, she said to the table, "Finally, maybe we can have a normal conversation for 5 minutes." Marcus reached under the table and squeezed my hand, letting me know he was paying attention to everything Jessica was saying. His military background had taught him to read people in situations, and I could tell he was not liking what he was seeing. But I kept hoping that Jessica would snap out of whatever mood she was in and remember how much she used to love spending time with family. The final straw came during dessert when Mom brought out a photo album of pictures she had taken of Ethan over the past 6 months. Everyone gathered around to look at the cute pictures, laughing at funny faces he made and marveling at how much he had changed. But Jessica stood up abruptly and announced, "Could we possibly not talk about the baby for like 5 minutes? Can we please talk about literally anything else?" The room fell completely silent. Even Ethan seemed to sense the tension and looked around with wide eyes. Mom closed the photo album slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. David and Sarah exchanged concerned glances across the table. Jessica, I said quietly, we are just excited about him. He is family. Everything is about him now. Jessica shot back, her voice rising. Every conversation, every gathering, every phone call, it is like the rest of us do not even exist anymore. Marcus had gone very still beside me, his training kicking in as he assessed this escalating situation. I could feel the controlled energy radiating from him like a coiled spring ready to react if needed. But I still hoped we could resolve this as a family, that somehow Jessica would remember what was really important. After the uncomfortable confrontation during dessert, we moved back to the living room where Mom tried to restore the festive atmosphere by suggesting we open presents. The pile of colorfully wrapped gifts under the tree looked inviting, and I hoped the joy of Christmas morning could smooth over the tension that Jessica had created. Mom handed out presents one by one, and for a little while, things seemed to improve. Jessica received several thoughtful gifts and appeared to genuinely smile when she opened the beautiful scarf that David and Sarah had chosen for her. When it was my turn to give her the special necklace I had picked out, I watched her face carefully as she unwrapped it. It says Auntie with Ethan's birthstone. I explained, hoping she would understand how much thought I had put into it. But Jessica just looked at the necklace for a long moment before saying, "Thanks," and setting it aside without putting it on. Ethan received an overwhelming number of gifts from everyone. Soft toys, books, clothes he would grow into, and educational toys for when he got older. Each time someone handed him a present, the adults would help him open it while he gurgled happily and tried to put the wrapping paper in his mouth. The innocent joy on his face as he explored each new item made everyone laugh and take pictures. But I noticed Jessica growing more agitated with each gift Ethan received and each photo that was taken. She sat rigidly in her chair, barely participating in the celebration happening around her. When Dad started assembling a new toy that made music and lights, Jessica stood up abruptly. "I need some air," she announced, and walked toward the kitchen. Mom started to get up to follow her, but Marcus caught my eye and shook his head slightly. His experience in managing difficult situations told him that sometimes it was better to let people cool down on their own. We continued with the present opening, but the atmosphere had definitely changed. Everyone was walking on eggshells, trying not to say anything that might set Jessica off again. It felt like we were all holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ethan had been such a good baby all day, but as evening approached, he began to show signs of being overstimulated and tired. He started fussing in his bouncy seat, making little whimpering sounds that meant he needed comfort. I picked him up and tried rocking him gently, but he was clearly ready for his bedtime routine. "Maybe we should head home soon," I suggested to Marcus. "He usually goes to bed around 7, and it is almost 8 now." Marcus nodded, understanding that keeping Ethan up too late would only make things more difficult. "Whatever you think is best," he said, but he was watching Jessica, who had returned from the kitchen but was now pacing near the Christmas tree. Mom overheard our conversation and looked disappointed. "Oh, but we were going to watch Christmas movies together. Could not he sleep here? We could set up the portable crib upstairs." I was about to explain why it would be better to stick to Ethan's routine when Jessica suddenly exploded from across the room. "Yes, let them leave. Maybe then we can actually enjoy Christmas for once, instead of everything revolving around that baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in the room froze, staring at Jessica in shock. Dad stood up from his chair, his face red with anger. "Jessica, Marie, that is enough. This is Christmas, and that baby is your nephew." But Jessica was beyond reason now. "I am so sick of this. I am sick of every conversation being about him. I am sick of everyone acting like he is the most important thing in the universe. I am sick of being ignored because all anyone cares about is Allison's precious little angel." Ethan, perhaps sensing the angry energy in the room, began to cry harder. I stood up and started bouncing him gently, trying to soothe him, while my heart broke at my sister's words. "Jessica, please," I said, my voice shaking. "He is just a baby. He did not ask for any of this." "Well, maybe if you could get him to shut up for 5 seconds, we could all think straight," Jessica yelled, and I saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. Marcus had risen from the couch now, his full height and military bearing making him an imposing presence in the room. His voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable warning when he spoke. "Jessica, I think you need to step back and think about what you are saying." But Jessica was past the point of rational thought. The months of resentment and jealousy had built up to this moment, and she was not going to be stopped by anyone's warnings. She took a step toward me, and I instinctively took a step back, clutching Ethan closer to my chest. "You think you are so perfect now. Do not you?" Jessica spat. "The perfect mother, with the perfect husband and the perfect baby. Well, I have got news for you, Allison. You are not special just because you managed to get pregnant." The cruelty in her voice was like nothing I had ever heard from my sister before. This was not the Jessica who used to braid my hair and share secrets with me late at night. This was someone I did not recognize, someone consumed by jealousy and rage. Ethan's cries were getting louder now, and I was having trouble calming him down while dealing with Jessica's verbal assault. I tried singing softly to him the lullaby I used every night at bedtime, but his little body was tense with distress. That was when Jessica did the unthinkable. I was gently bouncing Ethan and humming his favorite lullaby when Jessica suddenly stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. "I cannot stand this anymore," she screamed, and before anyone could react, she grabbed my arm, roughly causing me to stumble. The room erupted in shocked gasps, but Jessica was not finished. As Ethan cried louder, overwhelmed by the chaos around him, Jessica raised her hand and brought it down hard across my baby's face with a sharp, resounding slap that echoed through the entire house. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. Ethan's cry changed from fussiness to genuine pain and terror, a sound I had never heard from him before and never wanted to hear again. His little face turned bright red, where her hand had made contact, and his whole body shook with the force of his screaming. I stood there in complete shock, unable to process what had just happened. My sister had just hit my 6-month-old baby. Hard. In front of our entire family. The woman who was supposed to love and protect him had deliberately hurt him because she was annoyed by his crying. "Oh my God!" I whispered instinctively, turning my body to shield Ethan from Jessica. "You hit him. You actually hit my baby." Jessica stepped back, but instead of showing remorse, her face showed defiance. "I just wanted him to be quiet," she said, as if that explanation made perfect sense. "Maybe now he will stop that awful crying." I looked around the room desperately, expecting anyone to speak up, to defend Ethan, to tell Jessica that what she had just done was completely unacceptable. But my parents sat frozen on the couch, their faces pale with shock. David and Sarah stood by the fireplace with their mouths open, saying nothing. No one moved, no one spoke. They all just sat there like statues, while my baby screamed in pain and terror. "You are all just going to sit there?" I asked in disbelief, my voice rising with each word. "She just hit a 6-month-old baby, and none of you are going to say anything." Mom finally found her voice, but instead of the support I desperately needed, she said weakly, "Girls, please. It is Christmas. Can we not just calm down and work this out?" "Work this out?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "Mom, she hit Ethan. She hit a baby." Jessica crossed her arms and rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, come on, Allison. Stop being so dramatic. It was not that hard. You are totally overreacting like you always do. I barely touched him." Overreacting? I could not believe what I was hearing. You slapped my infant son across the face and you think I am overreacting. "It was just a little tap to get his attention," Jessica said with a dismissive wave of her hand. Babies need to learn they cannot just scream whenever they want. You baby him too much anyway. That is why he is so spoiled. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. Not only had my sister assaulted my child, but she was now trying to justify it and make me feel like I was the problem. And my family was letting her do it. Dad finally stood up from his chair, but instead of addressing Jessica's violence, he said, "Now, girls, this has gotten out of hand. Jessica, you should not have done that. But Allison, maybe you are being a little sensitive." A little sensitive. My baby had a red handprint on his face, and I was being too sensitive. That was when Marcus rose from his position on the couch. I had been so focused on the shock of what had happened and the betrayal of my family's non-response that I had almost forgotten he was there. But now, as he stood to his full 6'3" height, every inch of him radiated controlled fury. His voice when he spoke was quiet, but carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded troops in combat situations. "What did you just do to my son?" Jessica, who had been so bold and aggressive with me, suddenly seemed to shrink under Marcus's steady gaze. He was crying and You what?" Marcus took a deliberate step toward her, and I could see the military commander taking over from the family man. "Did you just hit my 6-month-old child?" "It was not a big deal," Jessica stammered, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. "I was just trying to quiet him down." Marcus looked directly into her eyes, and when he spoke, each word was delivered with precision and finality. "You hit my 6-month-old baby." He paused between each word, letting the full weight of her actions sink in. "Do you understand what you have done?" Jessica tried to rally her defiance. "Everyone is making such a big deal out of nothing. He is fine. Look, he stopped crying." But even as she said it, Ethan continued to sob against my shoulder, his little body trembling. Marcus took another step forward, and his presence filled the room. Years of military training and leadership experience had taught him how to project authority, and right now, every bit of that training was focused on Jessica. "That child is 6 months old. 6 months. He does not understand discipline. He does not understand consequences. He was crying because he is tired and overstimulated, and your response was to hit him." The room was so quiet now that the only sounds were Ethan's diminishing sobs and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Everyone was watching Marcus, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Get out!" Marcus said, his voice carrying the force of a direct military order. Jessica blinked in confusion. "What? Get out!" This time, his voice boomed through the house with such authority that even I jumped slightly. "You have 30 seconds to leave this house before I escort you out myself. You cannot kick me out." Jessica protested, looking around the room for support. "This is my parents' house. You do not get to decide who stays and who goes." Marcus did not raise his voice again, but somehow, his quiet response was even more intimidating. "Watch me." He took another step toward Jessica, and there was something in his posture, in the set of his shoulders, and the look in his eyes that made it clear he was not making an empty threat. This was a man who had faced down enemy combatants and led soldiers through dangerous missions. One hysterical woman who had just attacked his infant son was not going to intimidate him. "Mom, Dad, say something," Jessica pleaded, finally realizing that she had crossed a line she could not uncross. But before my parents could respond, Marcus turned his attention to them. "And if anyone in this room thinks what she did was acceptable, or that my wife is overreacting to someone hitting our baby, then you can leave too." His eyes swept across each family member in turn. "No one defends someone who hurts my child. No one." The authority in his voice, the absolute certainty of his position, left no room for argument. This was not a discussion or a negotiation. This was a direct order from someone who was used to being obeyed. Jessica looked around the room one more time, searching for an ally, but found none. Even my parents, who had been defending her just moments before, were now silent under Marcus's unwavering stare. "Fine," Jessica said, grabbing her purse and coat. "But do not expect me to come crawling back when you all realize how ridiculous you are being." "We won't," Marcus replied simply. And somehow those two words carried more finality than 1,000 angry speeches could have. As Jessica stormed toward the door, Marcus called after her one last time. "And, Jessica, if you ever lay a hand on my child again, we will have a very different kind of conversation." The front door slammed behind her with such force that the Christmas ornaments on the nearby table rattled. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed Jessica's departure was deafening. I stood in the middle of the living room, still holding Ethan close to my chest, trying to process everything that had just happened. My baby had finally stopped crying, exhausted from his ordeal, but I could still see the faint red mark on his cheek where Jessica had struck him. Marcus remained standing near where Jessica had been, his body still radiating the controlled tension of a soldier ready for action. His breathing was steady, but I could see the barely contained fury in his clenched jaw and the way his hands were held at his sides. This was not the gentle husband and father I knew. This was the military commander who had led men through combat, and he had just neutralized a threat to his family. My parents sat on the couch looking shell-shocked, as if they could not quite believe what had just unfolded in their living room. Mom kept wringing her hands and glancing toward the door where Jessica had exited, while Dad stared at the floor with a dazed expression. David and Sarah remained frozen by the fireplace, clearly uncomfortable and unsure of what to say or do next. The festive Christmas atmosphere we had worked so hard to create lay in ruins around us, replaced by intention so thick it felt hard to breathe. Finally, Mom broke the silence with a shaky voice. "Marcus, maybe that was a little harsh. She is family, and it is Christmas. Could we not have talked through this situation instead?" Marcus turned to face my mother with the same steady gaze he had used on Jessica. "Mrs. Patterson, your daughter just assaulted a 6-month-old infant. My 6-month-old infant. There is nothing to talk through." Dad cleared his throat and attempted to mediate. Now, son Jessica was clearly upset and not thinking straight. Maybe she just needs some time to cool off, and then we can all sit down and work this out like adults. "Work what out exactly?" Marcus asked, his voice remaining calm but firm. "Are you suggesting that hitting babies is something we negotiate about? That there are circumstances where it might be acceptable?" "Of course not," Dad said quickly. "But she is family. Families forgive each other and move past difficult moments." I watched this exchange with growing disbelief. Even after everything that had happened, even after seeing Jessica strike Ethan with their own eyes, my parents were still trying to make excuses for her behavior and pressure us to reconcile. "She hit my baby," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but carrying all the pain and betrayal I felt. She looked at my 6-month-old son and decided that the appropriate response to his crying was to slap him across the face. "And you want me to just forgive and forget?" Mom turned to me with pleading eyes. "Honey, I know you are upset, but Jessica has been going through a difficult time lately. She lost her job last month, and she has been struggling with feeling left out since Ethan was born. She just made a mistake." "A mistake!" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Hitting a baby is not a mistake, Mom. It is a choice. A deliberate, conscious choice to hurt an innocent child who cannot defend himself." Marcus moved to stand beside me, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. "We are leaving," he announced. "Allison, get Ethan's things. We are going home." "Wait," Mom said, rising from the couch. "Please do not leave like this. It is Christmas. We can work through this as a family." But I was already gathering Ethan's diaper bag and the few gifts we had brought for him. The thought of staying in this house one moment longer, surrounded by people who thought what Jessica had done was forgivable, made me feel physically sick. As we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message. Jessica had already started her campaign of justification. "I cannot believe you let your husband kick me out of my family's house. You are ruining Christmas for everyone because you cannot take a joke. That baby is fine. You always make everything about you." I showed the message to Marcus, whose expression grew even more grim. "She still does not think she did anything wrong," I said, my voice breaking. "That tells us everything we need to know about her," Marcus replied, taking the car seat from my hands. "Some people are not safe to have around children, Allison, even when they are family." The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of Ethan sleeping peacefully in his car seat. Marcus drove carefully through the snowy streets while I stared out the window, trying to make sense of what had happened to my family. Over the next few days, the situation only got worse. Jessica sent a series of increasingly angry text messages, each one blaming me for destroying the family and choosing my husband over my sister. She accused me of being overdramatic and claimed that she had barely touched Ethan. According to her version of events, I was the villain for allowing Marcus to disrespect her in front of everyone. My parents called repeatedly, asking me to be the bigger person and reach out to Jessica. They suggested that maybe I could apologize for how the situation had escalated and invite her over to talk things through. When I pointed out that she was the one who had committed assault, they said I was being legalistic and reminded me that forgiveness was important in families. But Marcus stood firm beside me throughout all of it. When my parents called him directly to ask him to apologize to Jessica for embarrassing her, his response was swift and uncompromising. "I will not apologize for protecting my child. If someone hits my son, they get removed from his presence. That is not negotiable." I began to doubt myself during those difficult days after Christmas. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should be more understanding of Jessica's emotional state. Maybe families were supposed to forgive everything, no matter how terrible. But then I would look at Ethan so innocent and trusting and remember the sound of Jessica's hand connecting with his face. I would remember how he had screamed, not with normal baby fussiness, but with genuine pain and fear. And I would remember how my family had sat there in silence watching it happen. One evening, about a week after Christmas, I was giving Ethan his bath when he smiled up at me with that pure, unconditional love that only babies can give. His face had healed completely, leaving no physical evidence of what Jessica had done. But something inside me had changed permanently. I called my pediatrician the next morning and described what had happened. Dr. Martinez listened carefully and then said something that brought me to tears. "Allison, you did exactly the right thing by removing him from that situation immediately. 6-month-old babies should never under any circumstances be subjected to physical punishment. Their brains are not developed enough to understand cause and effect, so hitting them serves no purpose except to cause pain and fear." She went on to explain that babies who are hit, even by family members, can develop anxiety and trust issues that affect their development. Hearing a medical professional validate my instincts helped me realize that Marcus and I had made the right choice, even if it meant losing relationships with people I loved. Marcus helped me research information about toxic family dynamics and the importance of setting boundaries to protect children. We learned about something called normalized abuse, where families become so accustomed to inappropriate behavior that they stop recognizing it as harmful. We read about how children who grow up in environments where hitting is considered acceptable often struggle with relationships and self-worth as adults. Slowly, painfully, I began to understand that protecting Ethan meant more than just keeping him physically safe in the moment. It meant creating an environment where he would never have to question whether he deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. It meant showing him through our actions that no one had the right to hurt him regardless of their relationship to him. The healing process was not quick or easy. There were many nights when I cried into my pillow, grieving the loss of the sister I thought I knew and the family unity I had taken for granted. There were moments when I questioned whether I was being too harsh, whether I should try harder to repair the relationships. But Marcus was my anchor throughout it all. His military experience had taught him about loyalty, honor, and the sacred duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. he never wavered in his belief that we had done the right thing. Allison, he would say when I was struggling, our first responsibility is to our son. Everyone else comes second to his safety and well-being. As the weeks passed, I found strength I did not know I possessed. I started reading books about healthy parenting and boundary setting. I connected with other parents who had faced similar challenges with toxic family members. I learned that love sometimes means saying no, even to people we care about. Jessica never apologized. In fact, her messages became increasingly hostile as she realized that I was not going to back down. She accused me of being brainwashed by Marcus, of being a bad sister, of choosing my new family over my real family. But with each angry message, my resolve grew stronger. This was not the behavior of someone who was sorry for hurting a child. This was the behavior of someone who felt entitled to continue hurting him. 6 months after that terrible Christmas, Jessica made one final attempt at reconciliation. She showed up at our door unannounced, claiming that she missed her nephew and wanted to make things right. But when I asked her to acknowledge that hitting Ethan had been wrong, she could not do it. "I still think you are making a big deal out of nothing," she said, standing on our front porch with tears in her eyes. "He was just crying so much, and I got frustrated. It happens. I would never really hurt him." "But you did hurt him," I replied, my heart breaking for both of them. "And until you can understand why that was wrong, I cannot trust you around my child." That was the last time I spoke to Jessica. She moved to another state a few months later and blocked all of us on social media. My parents occasionally shared updates about her life, but they stopped asking me to reconcile with her when they realized I would not change my mind. The loss of those relationships was devastating, but it also revealed something beautiful about the family Marcus and I were building together. We learned that we could trust each other completely, that we would always put Ethan's well-being first, and that we had the strength to make difficult decisions when protecting our child required it. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you were born into, and sometimes protecting the people you love means disappointing the people you thought you knew. I lost a sister and strained my relationship with my parents, but I gained something invaluable, the absolute certainty that my husband would stand up for our children no matter what, and that our home would always be a safe place where violence and cruelty have no power. Looking back now, I realized that Christmas dinner was not when my family fell apart. It was when it finally showed its true colors. And while the truth was painful, it was also liberating. Because now I know exactly who I can count on to protect my child. And that knowledge is worth more than any relationship built on the expectation that I should tolerate the intolerable. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and do not forget to subscribe for more real-life experiences about standing up for what is right, even when it is hard. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to set boundaries with family members who cross the line. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no to people who refuse to respect the safety and dignity of those you are meant to protect.